Hello, today I'll be sharing how I make my beans. So sometimes I use pinto beans, but lately I've been really enjoying Peruvian beans. So that's what I'll be making today. I start by cleaning the beans. So I go through the entire bag and pick out any beans that are off colored. Sometimes some pieces are missing. Sometimes there's like a little hole in the beans. So I just make sure that I remove everything that doesn't look quite right. And then I give the beans a quick rinse under some cold water. Next, I add all of those beans into a big pot, and this is the pot that I use. It's the biggest pot that I own, and I use this because once the beans start cooking, they'll expand. So you want to make sure there's enough room in the pot for the beans to cook properly. Sometimes I soak my beans overnight, sometimes I don't. It really depends on how much time I have. But if you soak them overnight, they cook a lot faster, so I prefer to do that when I have time. But if you don't have time, that's okay. This day, I was only able to soak them for about 3 hours, so you can see that they kind of expanded in size, but they're not at their full size yet. And I'm just going to drain all of the water out, give them another quick rinse before adding them back into the pot and then refilling it with some clean water. And I'm adding water to cover all of the beans and then about 2 inches above the beans. Next, I'm going to move over to my stove and set this pot at a medium-high heat and wait for everything to come to a boil. In the meantime, I'm also going to add 6 garlic cloves. This is optional, you don't have to, but I like the flavor that it gives the beans, so I like to add garlic. And as the beans come to a boil, you'll see that there's this white foam that starts to form at the top of the pot. I like to remove that. You don't have to, but it is something that I like to do. And once everything is boiling, I'm going to lower it down to a simmer. I'm going to cover the pot and leave a small gap because this prevents the water from overflowing as the beans cook. I'm going to let the beans cook for about 30 minutes before checking on them. So here I checked them. They weren't quite done. They still needed some time. So I covered the pot again, let them simmer for another 20 minutes or so, and then check them again, and they were ready. So now I'm going to season them. I just added about a tablespoon of salt and let them simmer for another 5 minutes to have the beans absorb some of that flavor, and then added a little bit more salt. In total, I added about a tablespoon and a half of salt, but that is really to taste. It ended up taking about an hour and a half for the beans to cook, and that's because I soaked them for 3 hours. If I would have soaked them overnight, it probably would have taken maybe between 30 to 40 minutes to cook. And if I hadn't soaked them at all, sometimes it takes up to 2.5, sometimes even 3 hours for them to get that perfect texture. So the cook time does depend on how long you soak them for. So now I'm going to start to make the refried beans. So I'm going to add a thin layer of oil to this pan, and then I'm going to fry a tortilla in the oil for about 30 seconds. This is something that my parents always did when I was growing up. They say that beans taste better when they're refried in oil that's been used to fry something else. So it's a habit that I picked up from them. Now this part right here can be scary. When you add the beans to the oil is going to jump at you. So you want to make sure that you're standing as far as you can from the stove and add the beans quickly, because the quicker that you add the beans, the less the oil is going to jump around. And after I've added all of the beans, I'm just going to give everything a stir. If you were working with cold beans, this is where you would want to wait for the beans to come to a boil, but because my beans were hot, I just started mashing them right away. So I grabbed my potato masher and just mashed the beans. And the texture here really depends on how you want your beans. You can make them thinner, you can make them a little thicker, and then you can also taste them for salt and add salt if they need any at this point. And as you can see here, I have a lot of leftovers, and I like to freeze my leftovers because I eat beans pretty often and I don't like canned beans, and it's a pretty long process to make them from scratch. So I just freeze the leftovers in individual servings and then pull them out as I need them. Thank you for watching this video, and I'll see you on the next one.